Good morning, everybody. This is Campbell McCrary from Amvest Capital in New York. Welcome to the Amvest Capital Inc. live webinar with Hyperion Metals. Hyperion trades on the ASX as HYM and as TAOFF on the OTC. We do hope you'll enjoy today's program. It will be available in on-demand replay about an hour and a half after we wrap up. That's the process. A few housekeeping things. You can ask questions of Tasso right here. We'll read the questions in real time. You can get copies of the presentation and links to their stock pages and their website, all that. That's there, self-explanatory. And finally, at the end of the show, you can share your feedback. You can only do that once, so wait till the last lap of the show. And with that, Amvest, of course, is a New York-based specialist investment management and corporate finance firm focused solely on the natural resource space. And again, our disclaimer, this call is for informational purposes only. Very pleased to have with us today Tasso Arima, who's the executive director of the company. And I'm going to, with that, let him take it from there. And thanks for coming.
Great. Thank you very much, Campbell. And thanks, everybody, for joining again. I think this is the third or fourth time we are doing this. Yeah. So it's a great update for a lot of you from what I've seen on the list that has come around to me. So it's great to have a lot of you back on board to continue to listen to the story and get the updates. And for some of the people that are newer to this, I'll just give a quick background on myself and then get straight into what we're doing. A lot of this presentation is very similar to what we put out before. I'll get through it as quick as I can to then allow questions and answers to focus on what our future looks like and our upcoming milestones. We are on the precipice of releasing we've said third quarter we will release our resource, and we're right on the precipice of that. So that's a big milestone for us that should come soon. So that's a big talking point, I imagine, for a lot of people. But there's a lot of other very exciting developments that will happen over the rest of this year into next year that we think are fantastic for what we're trying to do here. But as a quick background for some of those people that do not know me, my name is Anastasios Arima, but Tasso for short. I'm one of the co-founders and the managing director and CEO of Hyperion Metals. We've got a very strong board. One of the other co-founders of me is Todd Hannigan, who's our executive chairman and sits on the board with me. And we've got a very strong team. The background from myself, I've been in the metals and mining industry for the last 15 years. The last 6 years, I moved out of the traditional mining industries, especially in the coal industry, had moved to the United States and was the founder of a company called Piedmont Lithium, which is listed both on the ASX but on the NASDAQ, developing a large North Carolina-based lithium hydroxide project, and has got investments in some very interesting projects in Africa and Canada as well. So I was key in helping to put that together. I worked with Keith, and then stepped off the board of that earlier this year. It's a fantastic company. I'm sitting in my Charlotte office right now and had moved to Charlotte because of that company. But a few years ago, we at the founding team within Piedmont also started looking at other minerals and metals where we wanted to have a big impact on, especially for the US and reshore critical minerals and metals in the US. And we focused in on titanium minerals and titanium metal because of a few things. Titanium mineral deposits typically contain not just titanium minerals, but other high-value minerals like zircon and rare earths, which we have in plentiful amounts here in West Tennessee. And in addition to that, those minerals are typically in short supply here in the US, heavily import dependent. In addition to that, titanium metal is 100% import dependent. Here in the US, there's no ability for the US to make titanium metal anymore, and there's a need to reshore that. And so we feel that for national security, for the advanced manufacturing industries, for the current administration's focus on advanced manufacturing as well, titanium and these sort of other minerals that we're going to make are crucial to the plans going forward for our advanced future industries. So with that, we'll get a little bit more in. There's some disclaimers here. We're going to make a few forward-looking statements over here, so if you can read that. Our mission, as I sort of alluded to before, is to reshore these critical minerals, but do them sustainably, and where we can, do them in a very low to zero carbon way. We are going to do this by leveraging our immense potential in West Tennessee on our Titan Critical Mineral Project. And then also integrate that with the titanium technologies that we've secured out of the University of Utah, which I'll talk about a little bit more, which allows for us to take those minerals or take titanium metal scrap and make low cost, low carbon titanium metal. We are located in an excellent jurisdiction between Nashville and Memphis. Fantastic access to power, gas, freight, rail, major highways, the ports to get it out, get our product to customers, although most of the product will be sold internally within the United States. Have got excellent access to skilled workforce. So we have none of the issues that we see in a lot of other mining jurisdictions, especially Western Australia, where I grew up. Just outstanding location to be building an operation like this. We have secured over 6,000 acres of mineral-rich ground in West Tennessee, and this has been built on the back of landowner and community relationship that we've built over the last 18 months out there, especially the last year. We have got a large office in Camden, Tennessee. Most of our geologists and our community personnel are based out of there. We are actively drilling throughout here, and I'll talk about that a little bit more later. But you can see the excellent, again, access to infrastructure and the proximity to one of the major potential customers from the titanium mineral standpoint as well. So just can't get a better spot for a mineral sands operation. In terms of what we're seeing, this is a historic district which was explored and was known about, but had never been explored to the extent that we're doing it at. We have drilled hundreds of holes. We have sent thousands of samples off to both SGS Lakefield and also our partner Minerals Technologies on the processing side. I think we've processed over 2.5 tons, and we're planning to process a lot more as we move through from scoping to pre-feasibility and feasibility next year. But what we've defined is that it is a major untapped critical mineral province, rich in the right critical minerals that are needed here in the US, especially when we think about the rare earth concentrates and the titanium minerals. And we're seeing grades and thicknesses that are more typical of large deposits we see in Australia or South Africa, for instance, or Africa. So we believe that this is going to be a massive potential untapped area with the right and rich critical minerals out right here in the US, in West Tennessee. The way we see our business is that there is a foundational critical mineral business, and this needs to be updated actually, but this is a traditional mineral sands operation, with the difference being is that we're approaching it from a sustainability standpoint. We have already talked about 100% renewable power supply into our eventual mine sites and processing sites. We are already talking and working with groups in the area where we want to make the mining operations as sustainable as possible. And we'll be giving some updates to that over the coming few months as well. Now, what we do is we extract out we overlay the McNary sand. We take the McNary sand, we put it through a simple wet concentration process. We separate out the heavy minerals. Most of that sand goes back into the pit, and we actively reclaim, rehabilitate behind others. Then from the wet concentration plant to the mineral separation plant, we expect that to all happen right here in the region. And from there, we just use electrostatics, electromagnetics, and separate out the key minerals. We've got a high-tie ilmenite. We've got a rutile that will go initially into the paint and pigment sector. We've got a premium zircon, which will go into the ceramic sector. We've got some other ceramic minerals that we see in there as well. And then we have a rare earth concentrate, which is rich in monocyte and xenotime. We've already struck an MOU with Energy Fuels, which can process that monazite and crack it and create a mixed rare earth carbonate, and they've got intentions to go further downstream into separated rare earths, and we're very excited about that potential partnership with them in the future. Everything we do, like I've already said, is with a focus on world-leading ESG standards, which goes from decarbonisation all the way through to how we treat our people on the ground and how we treat our communities on the ground. So we're very focused on that. This is something that I think every company should be focusing on, and is something that we believe will be more pushed on industries over the coming years, and is the right thing to do. So we believe our customers are going to want it, our potential future investors are going to want it as well, and and it's right at the top of my mind that I want us to be a leading, develop leading standards for our industry in this regard. And with this, as we develop out our operations with a strong focus on ESG, we want to be the most sustainable miner of these critical minerals and reshore these here in America, which is important to do. Now, for some of you who don't know the markets, I'll just quickly zip through the titanium and zircon markets. They generally work together. If you look at titanium and zircon, it's heavily used in ceramics, paints and pigments, those sort of industries tied to construction sector. Here in the US, we're going through a housing boom, and so that's driving up the demand for paints and pigments and for ceramics, tiles, so on and so forth. Globally, we continue to go through an urbanization trend with countries like China and India, so that's driving demand as well. Yet here in the States, we've become import dependent on the feedstocks required to make those paints and pigments. It's a big market, and there's no need to have that when you have the potential out here in West Tennessee to supply into the industry. You'll see here, these are the 5 plants. These are the only 5 pigment plants in the US. They're very large. The Chemours plant is one of the, I think, the largest pigment plant, chloride pigment plant in the world, and then we're a stone's throw away from some of these other large facilities as well. Very easy for us to get it, of course, to a potential like here, but also by rail up into the INEOS plants or by barge down into every other plant in the southern Gulf states of the US. So excellent location, and when you consider the logistical advantage, it's huge. This logistical advantage is also above what we will be from on the ground, being more sustainable and as decarbonized as we can be. When we look at the ultimate comparison to current imported material, we are well above as a better source, a more sustainable source of materials coming in. The carbon intensity of shipping is very high, especially for places like South Africa and Australia. So we have a huge competitive advantage there. On the rare earth side, we have put out some great updates there. We have monocyte and xenotime. We've got a significant amount of heavies compared to traditional monocyte deposits. So we are actually more of a rare earth concentrate with both monocyte and xenotime. This is important because the world continues to electrify. It's the right way to go. As you can see, all auto manufacturers are on board. There's a big push towards more renewables, and more renewables and EVs means more need for rare earths. Unfortunately, currently, most of the rare earths are coming out of China. So there is a need to diversify that supply chain, but also with the commitments made by most of the companies out there, all of the large ones, to find more sustainable sources of the supply chain, it needs to diversify China. So we provide that potential diversification. We have a large potential deposit here in West Tennessee, which is rich in rare earths. It's been known about, and now with the way the markets are, we can potentially develop it into the future. And we have, in that partnership with Energy Fuels, a potential way to process it right here in the US. So between us and Energy Fuels, we see ourselves being able to reshore that supply chain. So it's a huge step change from the current supply chain in the US. But where I get really excited is rare earths are important, and our titanium and zircon and other minerals are very important for the development of our industry out here. But where we can make a change and build a long-lasting legacy is to introduce low-cost, low-carbon titanium metal to the world at a cost that we can start substituting out stainless steel and aluminum with titanium metal and bring about, say, an age of titanium. Right now, most of the titanium metal goes into aerospace and defense industry here in the US. We are the largest consumer of titanium metal here as a nation, and that's because of our aerospace and defense industry. Yet, the US has no capacity to take the mineral and make metal. They can import in primary metal, which is called sponge, and combine it with scrap and melt it and create ingots and products from there. But they cannot, we do not have the capacity to take the mineral and produce our own metal. This has been growing in China. They've put pressure, the Chinese and Russian expansions or developments have put pressure on other producers. And if a country like Japan stops producing in the near future, most of those plants out there are not making any money in their titanium primary metal businesses, then the world's going to be reliant on Japan and China for their titanium metal needs. Between China and Russia, last year's numbers were 73% of titanium metal production came from those two countries. So it's a huge issue right now. In addition to that, it's a very carbon-intensive, energy-intensive process, which leads to the production of an inefficient intermediate product, being a large 10-ton titanium ingot, which then needs to be milled, forged into titanium metal parts. So it's a process which hasn't changed in a long time, but needs to change. And this is where the development and technology comes in. We secured technology that was developed by Professor Zach Fang out of the University of Utah, where he realized his team, which part of his team that did this work includes Dr. Hiram Leffler, who did his PhD on this technology. He works for us now as our lead on the research and development side in Utah. But and we're working very closely with Professor Fang in Utah as well today. But him and the team realized that hydrogen destabilizes the titanium dioxide bonds or the titanium oxygen bonds and allows for an alternative pathway to low cost, low carbon titanium metal, which is not available today in industry. So this technology in 2013-14, they took it to the DOE, to ARPA, the Advanced Research Programs Agency within the Department of Energy. It's the mirror of DARPA, of what DARPA is in the DOD. They were funded to take this from the lab scale to the pilot scale. In total, $10 million of funding was put in by the US government, $7 million of which came ARPA from 2013 through 2019. Boeing and Iconic were industrial partners here, and they showed that the process works. They took it to pilot scale, making titanium metal powders today, which showed that there's the possibility for zero carbon operations, much lower energy consumption, so much more energy efficient, lower cost, and a better, more superior product that's more suited towards advanced manufacturing methods. So we naturally make a powder, which can then go directly into 3D printing applications, or we can make into preforms and different mill products and different billets or whatever the customer needs, rather than have to start off with a inefficient ingot and then go from there. So for us, we see this as allowing us to reshore the titanium supply chain in America and reshore it better, producing titanium metal, and in some components and parts, especially ones that are using powder metallurgy or 3D printing, to be producing titanium metal parts and components which are at or lower cost than stainless steel parts and components. So we're very excited about that, because if we can achieve that and scale this over time, which is our plan to, the vision is to bring about an age of titanium and have the proliferation of titanium use not just within aerospace and defense, but in consumer products, in of course space exploration, whatever, but also in the EV industry, where lightweighting, corrosion resistance, and strength is a big concern. So that's the vision. We have got a great team. We've added some fantastic board members, including Melissa Waller, Lorraine Martin, and Beverly Wise, who have got varying experiences across finance through to the end supply chain and end users that we'll be working with. Outstanding. I'm really proud of our board now. I was before, but I'm super proud of it now. And then we've got a fantastic advisory board as well, and a fantastic team. We don't have the team here, but we've got a fantastic team as well. So really, we're well set up for the development of this into the future. So for us, in the next really 3 months to go for the rest of the year, we've got some big announcements to come out. The big ones here, of course, JORC compliant resource, like everybody's looking for. We have some product samples already gone out to customers, and that strategic partner outreach has already happened. Ideally, we can develop relationships like what we developed with Energy Fuels in our titanium zircon products as well. We are already also reaching out to partners on the titanium metal side. That is something that we can immediately supply them with samples today, consistent samples as well. And then, of course, we've got the scoping study or the techno-economic assessment for the mine, and also doing some economic assessments around the titanium metal business as well. So there's a lot going on. There's There's a lot of updates that will happen between now and the end of the year and well into first and second quarter next year. Over time, we do want to bring this to market in the United States, similar to what we achieved with Piedmont, where we dual listed on the NASDAQ, with the idea being that there is going to be a lot of interest by investors here. Now, since we last spoke, we completed a financing. We brought on board Fidelity from here as a major shareholder, 9.8% of the business. And we are now sitting with a significant amount of cash in the bank to achieve all we need to achieve over the rest of this year and over next year as well. So we're really excited about what the future holds for us, and we look forward to updating the market as we hit those milestones, because we think there's a lot of value to create in the short term and in the long term by building out our business. So with that, I'll hand it over for questions.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And again, everybody, please send in your questions. Simply fill that little box there that's pulsing in front of you now. So I guess pulling back for a second, was there any one reason besides, or is it just ultimately cost, that the titanium sourcing, mining in the United States and North America has actually disappeared? Was it like the rare earth, same thing, or?
Yeah, a little bit different. No, similar, I guess. We've here as a country, and what we're seeing and what you'll see with the resource, there's significant potential for titanium minerals and rare earths. So that wasn't realized to its full potential prior. And then the market just, for rare earths, the market really wasn't there. It was the EVs which drove the market. The market was here for titanium minerals. What drove it was more the expansions in China, and the Kroll process is heavily energy intensive and heavily polluting. So in China, they've got more relaxed restrictions, so lower environmental cost at the back end. Still very costly, but lower cost than what, say, the sponge produce for here. So that's why the sponge plants, the titanium metal plants, shut in here and went to importing product and combining it with scrap. So a little bit different than the rare earths, but follows along the same supply chain, the same thematic that China grows, China takes more of the market. Now, this is a step change, this technology. It completely changes the way that we can make titanium metal. No other technology can do it. There was some tries prior to this technology being invented, which allows for reshoring in America and actually allows for lower cost reshoring in America than over and above China. That's different than the rare earth industry, where there's multiple different ways to do it. It's just, research and development. Where here, and because of titanium's affinity for oxygen and those really strong titanium oxygen bonds, this scientific breakthrough, which was realized by the team in 2016, I think they wrote the first paper about it. It provides the potential for a monopoly. It's not, you would not see any of the rare earth potential suppliers able to have a monopoly over rare earths. There's always going to be different deposits and different processing methods and so on and so forth. Here, this allows for potentially us to produce titanium in such a way and in such a sustainable way and at such a cost profile where we believe it could be equivalent to if you had one company producing stainless steel. That's where it is. This provides for us to potentially have a monopoly over sustainable low-cost titanium metal production that has the cost structure to displace stainless steel and aluminum eventually.
Could it be the technology be easily replicated or somehow replicated by the Chinese, and their costs
would go patented, lower? So it's all patented, and there's some specific processes where, similar to, I look at battery manufacturing, the cathode manufacturers, there's some specific trade secrets. Could it be replicated? Not legally. Okay. And it would take a lot of time and a lot of work. But there is both IP and trade secrets around this, which protect us.
So
we are continuously innovating on this technology as well as we speak.
So on that note, and moving on to selling your product, if you were going to sell your product from the mine gate, who would your customers be? And if you use the hammer process, who would be your customers there?
That's two completely different customer bases. Selling from the mine gate, so I'll just take it back up to this slide here. Selling from the mine gate, paint and pigment industry, for sure. They're the big ones, and then the zircon industry, the ceramic industry. Whether it's into the foundry market or probably the ceramic market. So you look at some of the end milling companies that then supply into the ceramic supply chain for glazers, because this is a high quality product. The Monocyte, of course, we hope to take our MOU to a full partnership, some sort of strategic partnership with Energy Fuels over the longer term. And then when you look at the rutile and the ilmenite, it's just clear it can go into the American industry. So any one of these groups, or even into the European pigment industry, which is import reliant as well. So fairly straightforward on that front. Well-known, big markets, well-established pricing mechanisms and prices out there in the market. And as people can see, I think all of these prices are up. If you look at ilmenite, it's up. If you look at zircon and rutile, I've been seeing numbers in China of close to $3,000 a ton for rutile and $2,000 a ton for zircon. So, and even the monazite prices, if you look at Lucas last quarterly, they're talking about selling it for $7,000 a ton. So, prices are up. It's a deep market. It's a market that I think all these markets are in some form of deficit because of the growth happening right now. So, easy market to get into. Titanium metal powders or metals, a little bit different. And it depends on which market you go into. If you go down very downstream to the part manufacturers, whether it be in aerospace and defense currently, there's a range of different manufacturers that use these powders, and they're paying the $200, $300 a kilo for these spherical powders. Lower volumes, but they're paying a lot. And I think that's a market of around 2,000 tons right now. 10 to 12,000 tons if you consider stainless steel. But then if you consider the powder metallurgy market, I believe that's for steel, titanium, and aluminum, that's somewhere in the sort of 500,000 tons per annum today in America. But if you look at where we want to get to, it's not just taking the market share and selling into the aerospace and defense sectors, so the defense primes, the major aerospace companies and suppliers as well, but it's eventually cracking the back of stainless steel and aluminum and their hold over the automotive and the consumer products supply chains. And those markets are huge. I mean, I could rattle off, I'll rather talk about the competitors. The competitors are like the Outokumpus, the ThyssenKrupps, the Nippon Steels that are supplying stainless steel, supplying even titanium products into various different applications. These markets are massive. The stainless steel market is $110 billion per annum today. The aluminum market is $160 billion per annum today for the metal. If you look at the end part costs, there would be a lot higher. There will be multiples of that. So for us, it depends on where we want to go. We are talking to strategic potential end users in different industries, which see the potential for a more sustainable, environmentally friendly source of supply from America that can be a superior product to stainless steel and aluminum at equivalent sort of cost parity to what they're doing now. And that's where we focus a lot of our attention on those downstream discussions, and that's why we've brought on very strong directors to our board. Lorraine Martin ran the F-35 program. She did it, and then ended up being senior leadership within Lockheed Martin. And then Beverly Wise, same thing. She ran the different programs within Boeing, 737, 767, 787 down in Charleston, ended up being president of the Shared Services Division, which runs 7,000 people. So, I mean, they have immense connections and experience and understanding of those industries and how those industries move, and can provide significant operational expertise for us as to how we should approach not just the aerospace and defense industries, but other industries to utilize these metals. Then when we look at our advisory board, they're very strong. When we look, this is the chief scientist of Boeing's metallic materials division within Boeing Research and Technologies. Tom Witherford had headed up ATI's powder division, GKN's powder division, TIMET's powder division. He knows everybody. Dr. Fu she headed up Relativity Space and SpaceX, and now she heads up Trump, the machine maker, the 3D print machine makers division, to essentially look at new applications for titanium and 3D printing. So we have the expertise and we have the understanding of how to approach these markets. And we're spending a lot of time on approaching these markets right. We hope to strike some significant relationships over the, hopefully over the next 3, 6, 9 months to show the types of markets we can penetrate and the type of size this opportunity could be eventually.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to pass it over to Stu for a few questions.
Yeah, thanks, Tasso. And so I guess while we're on this slide, your 2 recent appointments to the board, if you could kind of explain...
3.
Sorry, 3 new appointments.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Beverly. And they came from big American firms. What excited them about, the Hyperion opportunity?
You would have to ask them what excited them about it. I think it's a common thread of the vision and the type, not just the vision to bring about low-cost titanium metal and proliferate it throughout the use, but also the legacy we want to leave behind, which is sustainability, bringing ESG, the whole gamut of ESG to the development of what is considered a traditional industry. Whether you look at it, we look at ourselves as a mining technology company, a disruptor in the metals technology space. We have a foundational mineral business, so it's a traditional mining business, but we're doing it differently. We're doing it more sustainably, and there's a lot of upcoming milestones we want to hit that sort of shows how we approach it. But I think that was just as important for our board members, sometimes potentially even more important than just sort of the making money part. I mean, we change the world with low-cost titanium, and we can bring about a sustainable solution for a lot of the metals that are going to be needed in our advanced industries, electric vehicles, future products. But I think having the want to do it right, we've got a blank sheet of paper today, and we want to do it right. And I think that was probably one of the biggest things which had our new board members want to join us.
Yeah, makes sense. And then since setting up Hyperion, have you seen, people look at the mineral sands business again, and any people trying to get ground near you guys, or like look at old mineral sands areas in the US, given it's been underthought of the last couple of decades?
It's a tough one for me to answer. I will say that I have been shown projects, whether that we could evaluate. The markets, we caught the markets at a good time. When we started this, it was, I think, $1,200 a ton, or even $1,000 a ton through till it's $2,000 a ton now. So the markets have gone our way, which is fantastic, pure luck. But definitely, I think there's been more of a focus on potential other opportunities. It's, as you know, Stu, it's not that easy out here in the States. You have to develop. We took 4, maybe 5 months of landowner discussions before we had our first option to lease, which was 300 acres. We've had 6,000 acres now. We're adding a lot that we want to, over the next little bit, over the next few months. But it takes a lot of work, a lot of boots on the ground. This is not like Australia or Canada, where I operated initially, where you can just go, you can be sitting at your mother's computer and peg 50,000 hectares in the middle of Alberta and send in a check for $500 and you're done. This is literally driving across from New York City to Tennessee during the start of COVID, trying to meet with people that were scared of COVID, and trying to negotiate these deals. Now I think we've done a good job. We've got an excellent team down there on the ground in Camden, and we want to show to the community that we're real about our sustainability mission and about doing things right. And I think that's coming through, and I think that's coming through with more also. As that comes through, I think more and more people are happy to discuss with us the opportunity to lease. There's a lot of potential out here. Could somebody else come in and start looking at other areas? Potentially, but you need to build that team, you need to build that trust of the community and all that. We have started to understand, because of our work, we've done the most work of any other group out here. A lot more than any other group, a lot more sampling, a lot more everything. We've got a different understanding of the geology as well than what the other groups have. Some of the theories around how these were formed are a little bit different because of what we've seen from our drilling and our analysis. So we think we have a competitive edge when looking generally in these types of areas, what's called the Mississippi embayment, throughout West Tennessee through to Mississippi and Alabama for future deposits as well. Right now, we're focused here on West Tennessee. There's immense potential just here in West Tennessee, but we believe there's more potential in some of the other states as well.
Yep, fair enough. And just if you could touch on like 3D printing and why that's also a big opportunity.
Yep, no problems at all. So if we look at if we look at traditional manufacturing methods, it's subtractive. So you start with big sheets or billets or whatever, and you CNC machine stuff out. So that's fine on recyclable product, but in something like stainless steel or titanium or aluminum, recycling those chips and that scrap is energy intensive and sometimes you can't do it. You can't get 100% recycled product. With titanium, you can't get 100% recycled product. Some of those chips and scrap pick up oxygen, and they have to go into the ferrotitanium market. So from a recycling perspective, going into 3D printing makes a lot more sense. You've got a lot less waste. You have a near net shape or a net shape product. But 3D printing also, because you have that net shape product, because you don't have that waste, because you're using material, has the potential to be very low cost for some parts and components. Now, I was at a massive conference just a week ago or 2 weeks ago called Formnext, and within that they had Rapid TCT, which is the preeminent sort of 3D printing conference, bigger than any mining conference you ever know by like 5 times. And there's a lot of developments happening. It's still growing. It's growing fast, but it's still growing, and it's still got a lot of growth to go. But there's some step changes in 3D printing types of processes, and it will be a whole nother hour of presentation it's not best for me to do it. But they all rely on one thing. They all are going to rely on a raw material supply chain. And as these near net shape 3D printing processes, but I would also say as traditional powder metallurgy applications continue to improve, which is much bigger than 3D printing processes today. Direct powder roll into sheets, direct powder into wire, and some of the other processes. As they evolve, they all come back to one thing. You need the raw material. All of a sudden, the advantage that big blast furnaces have producing big slabs and billets and stuff, continuous, they lose that competitive advantage of low cost because they produce these big material, just like the current titanium industry produces big ingots. And then to make a powder, they have to make it into a wire or a bar feedstock, gas atomize or plasma atomize it, and they lose their competitive advantage. With our process, we produce a powder from the start. We can produce powders at probably cheaper than what stainless steel, aluminum, potentially even steel powders can be produced. So we have a huge advantage over them. So as 3D printing additive manufacturing takes off, I think there's the potential to really, for us to scale our business and be the raw material supplier of choice for these advanced manufacturing industries. And that's the way the government here wants to go. That's the way the military here wants to go. Advanced additive manufacturing is also far, far lower energy intensity. And if run off, it just requires renewable power because it's like lasers, So So that it's part of the future that the government envisions here, and that a lot of industries are looking towards. So does it scale significantly over the next few years? Probably. Does it definitely scale significantly by 2025, 2030? I think so. And we can be the supplier of choice into that industry. That's what gets me excited.
Yeah, well, thanks for that. I'll pass on to Adam.
Great, thank you, Stu. So, Tazo, just adding on to the last point that you were making about the powders, the titanium powders. Can you talk a little bit about how you'd go from a powder to a form or to an ingot, and how that holds up, versus an ingot or a form, from a physical strength and a corrosion perspective.
Yeah, that's not as easy to answer because there's so many different pathways. So I'll try and think back to how best to say. So you've got the melting side and you've got the non-melt way of making products. So with powder, you can go meltless. So we can go sintering. We could always go back to melting billets and doing it that way, but not big ingots. We don't have to go through that big process that the traditional, just by way of the way the process is, it has to go big into big batches, produce big ingots to get the economies of scale. We don't need that. We're much more scalable at smaller rates. So we can take our powders, and we would like to stay in the sintering side. We could go the melt side, but we want to stay in the sintering side. And what we could do is we could press and sinter into billets and use technology that Professor Fang invented as part of this research to strengthen that billet, or roll and then strengthen that billet. We could go into hot isostatic press, which would give us qualities just like any other forged product, and then roll it or make it into wire. We could go direct from the powder into different preforms. We could go into metal injection molding side. I mean, and I got to say this: some of these things I knew from back when I did engineering at school, and it was theoretical. Some of them were very theoretical back then, but today we're learning a lot. I don't want to answer too much on that, but there's multiple different ways that we could get from a powder at low cost and with less steps to an end product. Prior to having the ability to source low-cost powders, no one ever really thought about it. There was a big research program going with DARPA when they looked at some potential low-cost powders. It didn't work out, but the process technology was heavily developed by Oak Ridge National Laboratories in Tennessee with DARPA funding, which is DoD funding. And there's some papers out there, but there's multiple different opportunities. If you have low cost and high quality, that's a big thing. High quality, so it's low oxygen, low chlorine, low sodium powders. There's a lot of different ways that we could get to, with equivalent cost, to current titanium mill products. And we think to far lower cost and get towards those stainless steel and aluminum costs as well. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done there. That's why we have Tom Witherford on. He is a mill person, right? He was with some of the best companies, Allegheny Technologies and GKN and TimeT. And we're going to be building and doing some more work around that. And there is some strategic customers which are keen on looking at different applications like that. So it's a tough question to answer, but there is essentially multiple pathways to get a quality preform or mill product or something that the customer wants that's as good or better than what they get now and is at lower cost.
So if you were looking to make a structural piece for a 737 out of titanium, and you could create it from powder and get the same strength and corrosion resistance as you could if you were milling it out of a billet?
Yeah, on certain, so I can't say yes on all because we haven't done all. We would need to do all different ones. But yes, there is a range of different parts and components which have already been tested from powders where you just get just as good, even potentially better. You could always go back to the melt process and do it that way, and then you will. There won't be a big difference, but there's a lot. It's a lot of work that we want to do as we look to scale the pilot facilities in Utah and work with potential partners to do that. So that's going to be probably a big focus of next year. Well, will be a big focus of next year. But yes, you can definitely. There's definitely parts and components out there which have been shown from powder to mill products to be to equivalent. Now, in aerospace industry and in the medical industry, you can do it, but you still have to qualify your product because it's just so important. So the qualification processes are long for those industries. But when you look at these other industries where we're trying to push into stainless steel and aluminum in non-fatigue critical applications, then I think there's a lot of opportunity there. We have to do our work. We have to show that our powders are low cost, and then we have to go through the process of making those. So it's important that we do that. But the historical research, if you read it, there's quite a lot out there, actually by Oak Ridge as well, that shows the potential is there.
Excellent. And then I wanted to ask you about costs. So when you were, if you could compare the costs of making a product, let's just say, a piece of rebar, from the titanium metal powder, making a rebar, how would you compare, how do you think that cost would compare by making something the same out of stainless, high alloy, as they call it, alloy carbon steel, stainless steel, or aluminum? Can you get to that cost structure or approach that cost structure?
So for rebar is a different one. Rebar is like a low cost, it's more like just steel. If we look at stainless steel components, I probably look at more sintered parts and maybe parts within the battery pack, for instance, of an electric vehicle. That's our aim, is to try and get cost equivalency with those sort of components. When we look at 3D printing potential components and other like small gears and stuff like that, then there's big potential there for us to replace. Now, rebar is a different thing. If there's there's so many different mill products and products like that are out there. Ones that are more specialized, like thinner sheets of metal, preforms for manufacturing different casings or something like that. I'm trying to think about what I'll give as an example, but where typically you come out with a big slab or big ingot, you make it into a slab or a thick sheet. We could go in there and make billets which are more closer to the shape, even if it was going to go into CNCing. That could bring potentially the cost down for an end user. So it really depends. Rebar is different because it's steel. Could we go into like frames? I've been thinking about like frames and stuff for high-end apartments. I've got an apartment in Miami. I mean, there's the salt just kills the frames, even if it's aluminum. Could you go into those sort of things? Yeah, you could. But it's very dependent on the application because we're getting so further downstream. But your powders can go into anything. What we're going to be choosing is those higher value parts and components already, which is hundreds of thousands of ton market, right? It's well more than what we can what we need to sign into. We're going for the low hanging fruit. Rebar would be the last one to fall, sort of thing, if we could get costs down as low as that. There's a lot of, but I take your point. There is a lot of different parts and components. We over the next 3, 6 months, 12 months, we'll be making different stuff, different parts and components, and we'll be trying to match it to what we think is the low-hanging fruit, and then people can understand what type of cost structure we're going for, what type of competitiveness we're going for on cost and also on sustainability compared to to traditional manufacturing methods for those components.
I guess to reframe the question, maybe, Tazo, if you were to look at a 737 today, you've got like a steel frame, you've got like an aluminum skin. Would the cost the cost of this new process be so competitive that you could replace the aluminum skin with titanium, the steel frame costs with titanium? Would it be that cost competitive?
We would want to go for the, I don't know about the skin, because it's probably for a commercial aircraft manufacturer, probably not needed, but for, parts of the frame and all that, that's what we would aim for sure. Again, aerospace will need the qualification, right? That's where they're just not going to switch over. It's a longer qualification process. So, that's what we would aim for. In the aerospace industry, and for me it's sort of aiming for the equivalent, a chassis or something like that in the automobile industry, a battery pack, battery enclosure, because you get so much bang for your buck by lightening that stainless steel or ultra high strength steel battery pack and making it titanium.
Yeah. Again, a similar question. If you were looking at a Tesla today, could you replace all the structural? I mean, I would assume you'd look to replace all the structural steel with titanium, but would you also replace, all of the outside, galvanized steel, sheets? Would that also be replaced with titanium, or would that not be
stainless steel? It would be less of a focus. We focus on stainless steel because that's that higher value. Eventually you potentially could, right?
I'm thinking from a cost competitive basis. Could you get down to that type of cost of a high quality galvanized steel sheet?
I don't know. We would need to do more work on that sheet, because those are pretty low cost, right? It's different than a stainless steel sheet, for instance.
Certainly.
That would open up, though saying that opens up a $1 trillion market, right? But we think a couple of $100 billion market already, with potential for downstream, is already big. But steel is more harder to replace, but it will be on the cards with certain areas. Again, when it's higher, more complex components, when it's higher strength type steels, that's what we would go after, but especially stainless steel on that market. So anything stainless steel, if you look at the Cybertruck, I think it's stainless steel skin. Yeah, we could try and replace that. That's what the target would be. It's a lot though. I mean, you would get, again, we want to target the parts and the where there's complex parts, more complex components, which are more expensive, right? And supply into that supply chain, because you're going to get more initially, for at least for the first however many thousands of tons, because those are those very high margin, very high priced, where those very high priced powders are going into today. But eventually, as we scale, you would want to look at that's definitely on the cards. Starting probably more with chassis and battery packs and stuff in the automotive supply chain. But there's a range of other opportunities that we've been uncovering in other industries as well.
Excellent. Tazo, just to switch topics a little bit, again, the land that you guys have for your mineral sands operations, is that all private land?
It's all private land, yes. So some of it is options to lease, some of it is options to acquire, and some of it has already been acquired outright.
Excellent. And are there various royalties, to those landholders?
Typically, it's a 5% royalty. Typically, it's going to be a 5% royalty on minerals.
And that'll be a 5% on whatever
Yes.
you sell at the mine gate, per se.
Yes.
And I assume, the hammer business would be sort of a separate business. So what you'd sell at the mine gate was really just the TiO2 and the monazite, feedstock per se. that's all the royalty would be applicable to?
On the royalty for the titanium minerals, I would need to go back and see, but the royalty on the zircon and the rare earths would be applicable to mine gate sales. So if it was sold for the mine gate, though, and that was how it was applied, then yes, it would be mine gate sales on everything.
Yeah, that makes sense. All right, fantastic. Let me throw it over to Erdi to see if he's got any questions for you.
Hey, Tasso, just a quick question here. For these two mentioned technologies, how much funding you guys provided to those so far? And what do you think you are going to spend on them in the next 12 months?
So on these technologies, I believe we spent about $1 million already. So with the option agreement payments and what we've spent over this year with Dr. Fang and his team, I believe we had a use of funds in the financing over the next year for the metals technology side of the business of approximately 10 million Australian. So that's what we expect to spend here. And again, it's going to depend on how many relationships we build, how much prototyping we want to do with potential customers, what type of potential customers we get. We may, if we secure large customers, then we can up that, or we can lower that if we want to as well.
Thank you. Campbell?
Campbell.
We have a few questions that are coming from the audience, and we also kind of run out of time, so we're going to please ask them quickly. Would graphene oxide be a potential competitor?
No, that's no. Graphene oxide could be used in different, but not for the structural members and components we're talking about. No.
Okay. The EU mining operations are being hampered by high electric and fuel prices. 4 major mining companies have complained to the ECM about high electric prices. How would this scenario and higher inflationary input prices affect Hyperion exploration, development, and mining operations? Does the HAMRA process mitigate these potential operating issues? Does sustainable equal profitable in the event no subsidies or grants come into play? So I guess just really, inflation. How do you stress that's for
inflation
that?
more hits capital right now with steel. Hitting capital somewhat, but not that much. These are fairly straightforward operations and plants. Here in the US, we've got a far different cost structure from labor through to electricity and fuel as well. So, cost of electricity down here is 5 to 6 cents a kilowatt hour. In Europe, I think it's up at 35, 40 cents per kilowatt hour euros, which is far, far higher than here in America. You wouldn't be able to build an operation like this in Europe. But here in the US, it's fairly straightforward, so we will be competitive from a mineral side. Having the hammer process definitely helps because it's lower energy intensity, so you have a competitive advantage there on less energy use than the core process than some other processes in the traditional metal supply chain. So again, you have advantages there, and because we believe we can take it to a continuous process, we should be able to gain economies of scale as well over the current Kroll titanium metal process. Does sustainable equal profitable in the? I don't understand.
So just sort of reading all this in real time, so forgive me.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so
Stephen Wellman.
Can you anticipate any subsidies or grants?
So yes, there is the potential for that, absolutely. With the way the current administration especially wants to push advanced manufacturing, energy efficient manufacturing, decarbonisation here. We do not need to rely on that at all to make this I think that's what it means, to make this a profitable business. No way. We don't need subsidies. But if we were to receive further funding from the government, whether it be by grants or loan guarantees or loans directly, it would just help spur the development quicker. And that's what it would do. But we do not need subsidies with this technology or with our mineral business to survive. We hope to be a very low cost titanium mineral producer and a very low cost titanium metal producer. Our aim is to be the lowest cost titanium metal producer. So we wouldn't need ongoing subsidies or anything like that, we believe. But having attention by the government and funding come in by the government could help us accelerate our plans to develop these operations.
And so kind of reading into that question, would you agree that you can be both sustainable and profitable?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, the sustainability side just comes hand in hand with it. I mean, I think actually by doing it right, it would lead to longer term profitability as well, because we'll be able to secure more land, we'll be able to grow our operations and gain more economies of scale. As we grow the need for renewables, the more renewables that are in the system, the more it's built out, the more it would lower its cost. Already it's come down in cost. And then I think as you look at carbon taxes coming in overseas, I think you're gonna see that we will continue to gain competitive advantage over our competitors. So I think it's not just the right thing to do, but long term, it's going to lead to long term, even more profitable operations.
Excellent. One last question. Perovskite, is that a friendly mineral in the process?
Perovskite, I would need to ask our team what they mean. I haven't heard that mineral come up in some of our chem scans and our work done, so I wouldn't know. I would need to ask that question.
I've never heard of it, but
I have heard of it, but I can't remember what it is. But I haven't heard of it in relation to it being a major
issue for you.
Where we are.
Yeah. Excellent. Want to thank everyone for tuning in and for your great questions. And please share your feedback when you get a moment. Replay will be available about an hour and a half, and the original link will work for it. And you'll also be getting emails to that. You can always catch it at amvestcapital.com/replays. All our libraries there. And I'm going to pass it back to you, Tasso. Give us a quick close. You alluded to some exciting news. Tell me more.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks, Campbell. And look, we'll jump on again. And sorry for everybody for delaying this a few times. I actually got caught up in COVID and was hospitalized, so we had to delay it a couple of times. So very sorry about that, but we're back now, and we will expect to do an update post the mineral resource and some upcoming milestones. So before the end of the year, I intend to have another update with you. But we have, as a company, we have a lot of exciting milestones on our plate in front of us, both from the mineral business side, which I know a lot of the Australians listening today would be very interested to understand about, and then from the metals business side as well. So stay tuned with what we're looking to do here. We are looking to build something special here, something sustainable, something that's going to be a leader in the space. And we are really excited. We've got a great team, and we hope to continue to hit those milestones and kick those goals over time.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Good day.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.